What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. Come on in, y'all. Come on in. It's cold outside. Welcome back to the Hills Are Silent podcast, where we chop it up about the games of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I am Two-Tone the Artist.
And I'm Mitch the Peach.
Let's get into it. What is going on, Mitch? I know you're recovering from being sick. Sorry to hear that, man, but you're sitting up, you're still alive. It's always a good thing. So, what's been going on with you? Any new games this week?
Yeah, fighting a little bit of the stomach flu, which I would not wish on my worst enemy. It was not a fun 24 hours, and I'm still kind of feeling the effects now. But yeah, we're mustering through it. I did still get a chance to play some games, though, which was nice having Nintendo Switch when I'm laying down in my bed most of the time sick. I got a chance to play the new Metroid Prime Remastered.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, and I'm excited to say that they put a lot of care into the remaster, almost to the point where I want to call it a remake because it's just so well done and they put so much into it. It almost feels like a remake similar to what they did with the Crash Bandicoot trilogy, where they really call that one a remake more than a remaster. But similar to the Hi-Fi Rush we talked about during the Xbox Bethesda event, Metroid Prime Remaster was released the day of the Nintendo Direct that they just had last week, or maybe a little over a week ago, which I thought was pretty cool. That, I mean, they had been talking about releasing this remaster for a while, but it was nice to see that they had this Direct going. They're like, oh, by the way, available now today, you can download. And just like Hi-Fi Rush suckered me into download it, Metroid Prime Remaster suckered me into buy it. And I'm not disappointed, though. It's been a lot of fun. I'm definitely going to play it through completion. I want to ask you, though, did you play a lot of the GameCube version? Because honestly, I didn't play too much of it.
So, I never played it back when it first came out, but recently, like in the past 2 years, I've picked up another GameCube, and the first couple of games I got were the Zelda games and the Metroid Prime games. And that was for two reasons. A, because those are just great franchises, and I figured that would be a good place to start as far as GameCube games that I didn't play back in the day. And two, at the time, those were still reasonably priced. Like, you could get the Metroid games and the Zelda games for anywhere between $20 or $30. Now, we're only 2 years later, and if you want to get these games on GameCube now, man, they're so much more expensive. It's ridiculous. So I'm glad I snatched those up when I did because, well, first of all, GameCube prices are just skyrocketing every single day. Like, I'm tapped out on GameCube. It's just too rich for my blood. But anyway, so yeah, I picked up the first two Metroid games on GameCube a couple years ago when I got a GameCube again, and I played only a couple hours of the first one. But what I played, I liked. I just had so many other games I was playing at the time that I got my feet wet on it, and that was it. But it seemed like a cool game, and I love first-person shooters, so as far as first-person shooters on the GameCube go, that's one of the best ones you can get. But other than that, couple hours of playing the game, I don't have much experience with it. What about you? Did you play it back when it originally released on the GameCube?
So yeah, I did play a little bit. Didn't play it through completion. I wasn't as much a completionist then as I am now as far as games that I would purchase. So didn't go through it at all. But from what I remember and reading a lot of articles about the remaster now, it kind of checks out that the controls were pretty clunky with the original version. I want to say maybe like specific aiming on which enemy you want was very hard on the original. And I'm pleased to say that the remaster, they completely overhauled the controls and they make it a lot a lot easier to aim, to move, to use all the abilities that Samus has to her arsenal. And it's super fluid and like easy to maneuver. And I think that is another reason why I think I'll complete it pretty quickly, is just because like it controls really well. But if you're one of those people that want to play it true to its form, they actually do give you an option to play with the classic controls. So you don't have to use the overhauls that they've done but I would highly recommend them because they are fantastic and they make aiming so easy.
Yeah, and with you saying that, the GameCube was never really designed to be a first-person shooter powerhouse. During that generation of the GameCube, the PlayStation 2, and the Xbox was the first-person shooter king. First-person shooter games ran well on that console. The controller was really designed for it. Like, I remember with the GameCube controller, now it's a wonderful controller design, but it had two completely different analog sticks. Do you remember that?
Yeah, the C stick, the yellow one.
Yeah, and the C stick was just, I don't know, it wasn't great for first person shooters. And I'm always fascinated by the evolution of controls, because we went from original Nintendos, well, it goes way beyond that, but as far as console gaming, and at least when I started playing console games, I remember the original NES controller had a D-pad and 2 buttons. Then the Sega Genesis had 3 buttons, and then eventually the Sega Genesis had another model that had even more buttons and triggers, and then eventually the PlayStation 1 came out with no analogs. And then later on in the PlayStation 1's life, they eventually released the first DualShock that had 2 analogs, because they realized, hey, we need a dedicated analog stick to move the camera around. And that exactly with the GameCube, that's why it was the C button. It was the camera button. And on the N64 controller, it was the up, down, left, right C buttons. They were called the C button because it was supposed to control the camera. So all of a sudden, video games are changing from 2-dimensional to 3-dimensional, and controlling the camera becomes a thing of, okay, we got to figure out what's the best way to do this. And then around the time of the GameCube, the PlayStation 2, and the Xbox, that was slowly kind of coming into form. And now today we have our modern controls where almost universally the left thumbstick controls your character's movement in space, while the right thumbstick controls the camera. Now, having said all that, there is the thing where when we make remasters and remakes of old games, do we modernize the controls? Is that changing the original experience too much? Or is it that it's necessary to make these old games enjoyable?
And I think it's a valid question, which is why I'm really happy that, for people that want to play with the classic controls, they have the option in Metroid Prime Remaster. But for me personally, I would love overhauled controls and more, and I guess to feel smoother, because I feel like the game has a more positive experience when you're moving around smooth, when you're shooting smooth, when you're playing the game the way that I think they would have liked it to be created when it originally came out. They just didn't know exactly how to do it then.
Yeah.
It wasn't as universally known how to control left stick with movement, right stick with camera, like it is now.
Yeah. And even going back to GoldenEye, with the N64, I mean, yeah, those controls are crazy weird to go back to nowadays.
And I've heard from people that have played. I haven't gone back and played the ones on Switch or Xbox One that they have now.
You mean the ones that they just recently released?
Yes.
Okay.
The ones that's recently released. But from what I've heard, the Nintendo version that they have in the online service is not very good. I guess I think it's maybe too true to when it was released compared to the remaster that they released on Xbox, which is what I've heard, the way better way to play that game.
Yeah, I heard that as well, that it was made by 2 different development teams. The development team that released it on Nintendo Switch, they did not overhaul the controls. So you're getting the original Nintendo 64 controls, which is difficult because they did release a Nintendo 64 controller for Switch that would probably make that a little easier, even though it is an old control scheme. But if you're playing on a Nintendo Switch and then you're trying to play with classic Nintendo 64 controls on a Switch controller, that would definitely screw with my head. But yeah, with the Xbox version, they did modernize the controls apparently.
Yeah, and I heard it because you can only play the campaign on the Xbox version. There's no multiplayer feature with that one. But if you're playing the campaign, it seems like that's the way to go.
Yeah.
One other thing with Metroid that I do want to bring up and ask you, because I'm curious myself, is this the first game where we figure out that Samus is a female?
I don't know. I think
It was
maybe it was.
always
I think the reveal was in this game.
because it was. I remember my friends and I before we played Metroid Prime, or a lot of us didn't play a lot of the older Metroids, but we played Super Smash Bros. And Samus is in Super Smash Bros. And there was some like way you could see. I think there's like maybe like an electrocution item or something, where like you could see through Samus's suit, like if you do it the right way, and then you figure out that she's a girl in Super Smash Bros. But but I want to know what game was it where people figure out that she's female.
I think it was the Super Nintendo version. I think at the very end of the Super Nintendo game, when you beat it, it's revealed that she's a woman. So I don't think Metroid Prime was where that was revealed.
Yeah, I think it was just a sign of the age of us. We just assumed that it was a male protagonist because there really weren't a lot of female protagonists at that point in gaming. But refreshing to see how modern Nintendo was even back then.
Yeah, absolutely. So have you played Metroid Prime 2 or 3?
I actually bought Metroid Prime 2 at Mega Replay, our local game store back in our hometown, but I've not played it. No, I might give it a whirl after I beat Metroid Prime Remastered, just because I've really not heard much about the second one as compared to the first, though.
Yeah, hopefully they remaster those ones as well. So if I remember correctly, Metroid Prime 1 and 2 released on GameCube, and then
Yes.
Metroid Prime 3 released on Nintendo Wii, and at some point they re-released the whole trilogy on Nintendo Wii with motion controls like incorporated into it.
I did not know that part. That's interesting. And I know Metroid Prime 4 is in development, but it's been in development for a very, very long time. And I know if I'm thinking correctly, the original Metroid Prime 4 that they were going to release, they did not like what they did and they scrapped the whole thing and they started over from scratch. Because I want to say they first talked about a Metroid Prime 4, man, back right when I got out of college almost, and like it was at my first job out of college. I remember listening to a podcast and then talking about, the rumors of Metroid Prime 4.
Well, we'll patiently wait to see if that's ever actually finished and released. But yeah, man, I'm definitely going to go back and play this. I don't have a Nintendo Switch, but I'm either going to play this on my GameCube or through emulation.
Well, never too late to get a Nintendo Switch, though. Now may be the time.
Yeah. Eventually I'm going to get one. I've been meaning to get one for the longest time. I'm always late to the game, but it is what it is.
Honestly, that's never a bad thing. Usually you can get some good bundle or a discounted price, and you get more for what you paid for than what I would have got when I bought it like day one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, man. All right, so any other words on the Metroid Prime?
No, nothing
remaster?
there. It's excellent. I highly recommend it. It's only $40 in the eShop. I think that's a fair price for it. I had credit already, so it didn't cost me anything. But I think it's well worth it.
Nice. So you and I also played some cooperative gaming this past weekend, and what we dove into was MechWarrior 5 Merceneries. Now, this was highly recommended to me by one of my buddies, and he's like, you got to check it out. It's an awesome game. It's a very deep game. And we realized it was on Game Pass. So what do we have to lose? Yeah. We already have Game Pass.
Exactly.
Let's install it. Let's jump in and check it out.
Real.
So it is a co-op game. You can also play single player. And actually, you have to play through the first couple of missions in single player before the co-op is opened up, which seems to be pretty common on co-op games these days, where they kind of basically put you through a tutorial before they let you dive in with a buddy, especially if it's a game with deeper game mechanics or a higher learning curve. So we jumped into this. At heart, it's a third-person shooter. Now, the MechWarrior series has been around forever. I remember these games back in like early to mid-90s. They were computer games. And obviously, they've come a long way. I don't think I've ever actually played any of the older MechWarrior games, although I've played many other games that were not spin-offs, but imitations. There was a game, I think it was called Genome, that came free on my Windows 95 disc or Windows 98 disc back in the day on one of our very first family computers. And it was basically a clone of MechWarrior. And then later on, with the original Xbox, there was the Mech Assault games, which were, I think, a little more fast-paced and action-oriented. So anyway, we dove into MechWarrior 5. As I mentioned, it's a shooter at heart. You can go in either third-person view or first-person view. You're essentially a mercenary, as the subtitle suggests, and you can pick up jobs, and usually those consist of protecting some base or attacking some other base or something along those lines. And you get money for completing those missions. Now, the shooting mechanics are nice. You can update or upgrade your mech. That's fun. There's all different kinds of parts you can salvage or buy from stores. But what really takes this game to the next level is how deep the economy mechanics are and how much there is in managing your business and your inventory, because you have monthly expenses, and those are repair bills because your mech gets destroyed during the mission. You might get your whole arm blown off, so now you got to buy a new arm for your mech and also repair the other damage done. You got to pay for pilots because you can deploy into missions with entire squads, and that means you need to buy multiple mechs, you need to repair multiple mechs, upgrade multiple mechs, pay your pilots, pay all kinds of other monthly expenses you have. And so it's a real big game of risk and reward. How much risk am I willing to take for a high-paying mission where if I fail that mission, I may not be able to repair my mechs and continue my business as a mercenary? So it can get intense. And there's so many different ways you can upgrade your mech, so many things to consider: weight limit, limited ammunition, short range, long range, speed versus power and defense. A lot of strategy involved, more so than your typical shooter. So that's just an overview of the game. It's a lot to take in, not for the faint of heart, not for somebody just looking to jump in a game real quickly and immediately know what to do. There's a lot of variables. But anyway, right. I enjoyed it. Mitch, what was your thoughts on this game when we were playing through it?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I wish we could have done a little more co-op together. I know I had to run once we got through the single player portion, we can actually get together and play in somebody's campaign. I had to leave, but from the limited co-op that we played, I enjoyed it. I wish we could have brought our own mechs in to help you in the campaign, but I could see where that might be a little unfair, especially someone like your friend who has gotten way farther in the game than we have could maybe come in with his like super meched up bunch of guns, way more powered than the ones that we had, and could have maybe ruined the experience a little bit or made it a little easier for us. But overall, I enjoyed it. I like the attention to detail that it had for when it came out. I'm not sure when it came out exactly, but I mean, graphically looks beautiful. And I want to go back to, like you said, when like if a mech got their arm blown off in combat, you come back and you have to pay those repair costs. It shows your mech being repaired, and you can see the exact limb that came off in the mission is off when you show it getting repaired. So I thought that was really cool, that the attention to detail there. Yeah. I do want to jump back into it. I think there's, like you said, there's a ton of depth to it, and I only feel like I scratched the surface with it. It was very helpful to have your friend explain a lot of it to us, because I would have been a little more lost.
Yeah, absolutely. And to the audience listening, what Mitch is referring to is when you play this game co-op, you don't get to join in to your friend's game with your own mechs. So when you're joining in someone's game, it's not like you're sharing progress in the single player. You're literally just jumping in a support role using the mechs that the person already owns in the game that you're joining. So like he was limited to the mechs that I had in my garage, essentially. So that's a bummer to me. I always like to play co-op games where the progression counts for both players and not just one player. So that would be probably my main criticism of this game, is that some shared co-op progress would have been much nicer. And the other thing was very weird is Mitch mentioned the graphics are really good in this game, but I think it's like one of the graphic settings was like the effects, like the particle effects or something, and putting that on high just tanked the performance of the game. It would run smooth, and as soon as you shot your gun, it would just drop, and as soon as you were done shooting, go right back up to like 60 frames per second. So I don't know what was going on with the particle effects, but I had to, as soon as I put it from high to medium, performance was perfect. But whatever they're doing there is just like tanking performance if you put that on high.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I totally forgot about that, but I do remember, even for me, like I think I have a little bit better computer than you, and even for mine, like right when I shot, like my entire game just froze. I'm like, what the heck? And then I was done, and then it resumed, and then perfect again.
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems like with computer games, sometimes there's that weirdness where you got to just tweak the settings to get it to run nice. So yeah, MechWarrior 5, we'll dive into it again. That was a cool game, and it is a huge, huge game. When you zoom out on the map to see all the different planets you can go to like get missions, I mean, it is just like thousands upon thousands of planets. That overworld map is just huge and intimidating.
It was nice your friend suggested it, because I don't think I ever would have even tried that game if not for him.
Yeah, me neither. That's why, man, I'm always open to suggestions. If you guys listening have suggestions, you can always hit us up on our email. Let us know. I'm always down to try something new, and that's something you guys will see on this episode today, is a lot of Mitch and I trying games that we probably otherwise would not have tried. That's the theme of this week's episode.
It really is.
So the other game that both of us gave a try this week is one that came out of nowhere. For those who don't know, I am a huge survival horror fan, especially the old Resident Evils are near and dear to my heart. And I caught wind that a new indie game, and I say indie because it's developed by a small development studio called Moon Glint, and it's comprised of only 2 people working on this game. And they released this game called Echoes of the Living. And this is a homage to those early 90s Resident Evil games. I'm talking about the ones on PlayStation 1. And everything down to you being able to pick between 2 characters, a male and a female protagonist, and the game having fixed camera angles like the original Resident Evil games, and even going as far as having tank controls. And we were talking earlier about old control schemes being difficult to deal with. Well, this game brings it all back. I mean, you are essentially playing a game that plays identical to a PlayStation 1 Resident Evil game, aside from better graphics. So I played it all the way through. Right now they've only released the demo, which is about I'd say on average 2 hours long, and the game's supposed to release at the end of this year. So I played all the way through the demo. Mitch also dove in for a while. I don't think he got quite as far as I did, so I'm curious to hear his opinion, his experience, how far he got. And anyway, take it away, man.
Yeah, I got probably about a half hour in, and there were a lot of games we were trying this episode, so I didn't want to sink too much time. My original idea was to finish the whole demo like you did, but I think I will go back and do it. but for the podcast's sake, I was trying a bunch, and I guess I want to say, like, I'm no stranger to the tank controls, and I'm no stranger to, clunky controls in general, but to me, this game felt almost worse than the Resident Evil controls that I've played, or even like the old Silent Hill games that had really bad tanky controls as well. Like, for some reason, I couldn't get a hang of, the shooting, the motion and whatnot, but I could with older Resident Evil games. I don't know what it was. Maybe just because I'm a little rusty and haven't done it in a while, but I only got a half hour through, but I want to say the positives about it, because I'm going to go back and play it through. They really kept it, like you said, identical to a Resident Evil game, and almost the opening felt like Resident Evil Outbreak when you and I played that together. Like, even like the first room that you go in really just felt very much like Resident Evil Outbreak, which I thought was interesting. But overall, yeah, I didn't get as far, but I'm going to finish the demo because I also love survival horror games, and it looks graphically beautiful. But yeah, I couldn't get around the controls, so I'm glad you played it and finished it, and maybe had a better experience than I did.
Okay, so you were not the only one to complain about the controls. I hopped on the Steam discussion page, and it was just post after post. Can we please get modern controls? Can we please get modern controls? Can you at least give the option to do tank controls or modern controls? And true, that would, if they allowed you to just have regular controls that weren't tank controls. And for those who don't know, the younger gamers, tank controls, I mentioned on the original PlayStation 1 that the early controller did not have dual analog sticks. It just had a D-pad and the face buttons. So when games were released for the original PlayStation prior to the very first DualShock controller being released, a semi-common control scheme, which is now today known as tank controls, is where your character, you hold left and right, and your character will turn to face left or right, but then you have to hold forward and back to then move them in that direction, sort of like a tank. Like a tank has to turn before it can move forward and back. So that's why they're referred to as tank controls. And it is very clunky. And once dual analog sticks came out, there was basically no need to have tank controls anymore. It was a product of its time. It's totally unnecessary today. But the side effect of tank controls, especially in the old Resident Evil games, is it made it much scarier. Because when you take away a player's control and they're faced with a scary situation, you panic. You're like, oh, a zombie, oh crap. You can't just run away real fast. You have to turn, then run away. And so it really worked for Resident Evil games back then as far as heightening the fear and anxiety in those games. Now, I don't think it was in the first Resident Evil, but I think starting in Resident Evil 2, they implemented a quick turn function where you would hold back and press a button, and your character would immediately turn around and face the opposite direction. So over time, the longer you play, the better you get at that. So you can move around the tank controls, and then when you get stuck in a panicky situation, you do a quick turn, and then you run off, and then you quick turn back, and then shoot your gun, now that you've left some distance between you and the monster. So for somebody who's younger, who hasn't ever played a PlayStation 1 or any of those old games, you might just be like, why on earth are these controls so bad? And I saw that in the discussion post. Some of these people, I'm assuming, had never played this game, and they're just like, why are the controls so terrible? Why are they so terrible? And it's like, dude, in this case, it's not that the developers are idiots or anything. They did this on purpose to mimic the old Resident Evil games. And they did such a good job, so much so that I call this like the Lost Resident Evil sequel. So this is like that beautiful what if situation where what if they made one more Resident Evil game on the PlayStation 1 before they moved on to the PlayStation 2. And even Resident Evil Code Veronica, the first Resident Evil game they released on PlayStation 2, that even still had tank controls. even though at that point it was totally not necessary. Well, wait, I think they did. I don't know. I'll have to go back and check. I played that not that long ago.
I can't remember, to be honest with you.
All right, that's gonna kill me, man. I gotta look it up.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad that you had an enjoyable experience with this. I think I will too if I give it another go. I recently have just played through Resident Evil 1 and the remastered version, and I've also recently played through Xbox 360's version of Silent Hill 2 and 3, which all those games have those tank controls in them. So I'm not sure what it is with this one that kind of was, I guess, making me feel worse than those, but maybe when I give it another go, I'll have a better time with it. And but go ahead.
I was gonna say I did not notice that, but yes, even some people in the forum discussions were like, these tank controls feel worse than the original Resident Evil games. So that may very well be the case. Yeah, they may need some minor tweaking. There was a couple of times where I think the original Resident Evil games had a little more generous aiming too. Like you didn't have to be directly aiming at the zombie to still hit it, but in this one, if you weren't lined up perfectly, you would miss your shot. And for a game that gives you limited ammunition, where every shot counts, that's not a good thing. So I did run into that some where I was like, maybe they should widen the hit boxes on the zombies if they're going to be giving us tank controls.
Another minor thing, I'm assuming they'll correct pretty easily, but in the demo, I don't know if this was the case for you, but I would go into the volume setting and I would bring the master volume all the way down, and it wouldn't make a lick of difference in my game.
Yeah, there were a couple weirdnesses. Every time I launched a game, it opened Steam VR, even though it was not a VR game.
Huh.
And a couple other weird things I noticed in the menus, that were kind of buggy. But I mean, it is an early demo.
Yeah.
But anyway, the game plays so similar to the old Resident Evil games. They got the puzzles, the way you backtrack, and even the level layouts, like you said, it looks like they're directly from a Resident Evil game. So I appreciate what they're doing. I am definitely going to be grabbing this game when it comes out. I'm sure there'll be some minor tweaks to have some quality improvements, and some cutscenes would be great. I think that was the only thing I was really missing, was there wasn't a whole lot of story. There were some little journal entries you'd pick up and read, but other than that, man, they kept it faithful to the old Resident Evil games. And I mean, some could say almost to a fault, but it was almost like finding like a hidden beta release of some old Resident Evil sequel that never saw the light of day.
Yeah, going off of your cutscene thing, the eerie cutscenes of old survival horror is just like, it brings me so much nostalgia and joy, so I would like to see some of those as well.
Yep. All right. Anyway, I got super excited about that. I thoroughly enjoyed that one. It just hit all the right nostalgia centers in my brain.
I'm gonna go through and finish it. It's only a demo. I can brave through it. I think if I start all the way over, I know where I'm going this time right away. At least I'll maneuver through the controls. It'll be fine.
Yeah. Oh, a few more things I wanted to note, just to show how closely they're matching the Resident Evil games. You still get green, red, and blue herbs. You got to mix those. You mix gunpowders to make ammo, which is also a trope from the old Resident Evil games. The shotgun is the exact same, to where if you were just to shoot a zombie with the shotgun straight ahead, it would take a couple shots. But something you discover playing the old Resident Evil games, if you let the zombie get right up to you when they're about to bite you, and you aim up in the air and shoot, you'll blow their head off in one shot. So basically, once you figure that out, that's the only way you can use the shotgun. But man, yeah, it's just so much we're going through. It's just all these little nods and identical game mechanics.
I think it's really perfect timing for them too, though, because survival horror and all these Resident Evil remasters and whatnot, and getting people into these games that have maybe never played them before. I think it's a really good time to get, to release something like this.
Yeah, I think so too. My only other complaint is the animations are pretty bad in the game. just, but then again, that's typically the case with small independent games. They don't have a big fancy motion capture studio to get these real hyper realistic animations. But yeah, so but then again, also the PlayStation 1 Resident Evil games had terrible animations too. So part of me was like, I can't even complain about this because it's just like it would have been on PlayStation 1 on Resident Evil. These stiff animations that are all goofy looking. Okay, yeah. I think we've sunk enough time in that. Anyway, so Mitch and I wanted to play some games that we would not normally play, and that involved several things. Do we have any weird games in our Steam library that we somehow got? Either somebody gave it to us or it came in some bundle or something. And let's just pick a game that we have in our Steam library. Don't know why we have it. Never planned on playing it. And just play it. And see if we like it. See what happened. And even beyond that, Steam is just an infinite rabbit hole of weird games. And if you really go searching through the thousands upon tens of thousands of games on Steam, you will find some very bizarre, very niche games. Some that'll make you question why they even exist, why you even exist. It's weird. Mitch, what was your game in your Steam library that you never would have played if you weren't pressed to play it right now in this challenge?
Yeah, and this was a surprising one for me because honestly, it's a pretty critically acclaimed game, but I've just had it sitting in my library since 2017 when I first built my PC. It was one of the first games I bought in my Steam library, and it is called Bastion. And Bastion is developed by Supergiant Games, and for those who have never played Bastion or maybe familiar with Supergiant Games, they created most recently Hades and the upcoming Hades 2, which I know a lot of people have played that game. So I was shocked right away when I was like, well, I've played a lot of their other games. They've released a couple others, such as Pyre and Transistor. But Bastion is the first one they developed. And Bastion itself is an action RPG. You play as a character just named the Kid, whose job is to repair a city that is in the aftermath of some catastrophic event that they call the Calamity. And what's cool about it is as you're completing through levels, you'll receive new weapons, tonics, shops that'll have different effects, and these shops will give you more items to help you along your way. The Bastion itself, or the area that you're repairing, is kind of your hub. You sit in this hub and you build up shops, and you go and you upgrade your weapons, you get new items, you get new tonics, weapons, whatnot, and you combine them all and then jump into another level. Throughout each of these levels, you have a narrator who basically is talking through your moves as you're making them through the entire game, which I thought was kind of interesting. That, like you'll go north in a certain area. It's like, oh, the Kid is going north. He's going to go explore the the depths of hell over here, or something. You just different things that that you're doing throughout the game, which I thought was very interesting. And the narrator itself is actually the one person you meet when you're rebuilding the society. He's one of the only other survivors that you run into, and so he starts talking to you and basically narrates the entire game as you go through it. It wasn't what I expected. I think it is. I'm not sure how long it is. So I had the impression, and kind of why I didn't play it up until this point is because I thought it was really long, and I'm not typically one that likes to sit in my computer a long time and play. I'd rather be on my couch, but I don't think it is as long as I thought it was originally. So maybe it's one I will finish on the PC. But it's graphically beautiful. I've noticed that all Supergiant games look very similar now that I've seen Bastion, I've seen Pyre, and I've seen Hades. They all look very similar and really cool graphic style. And for a game that came out in 2011, it still looks very well. It controls very well. It runs very well. And I thought it was interesting. It came out in the height of, I don't know if you remember, the Xbox 360 arcade. That's basically when this game first came out. And I looked it up, and I think half of the sales of Bastion came from Xbox 360.
Yeah, just I noticed that too. Just watching the trailer at the end of it, it had an Xbox 360 emblem indicating it was released on that console.
Yeah, I know, like, the Xbox arcade was like a super, like, big, I don't know, like, it was super big for indie developers specifically. I really think Xbox and Microsoft themselves, aside from Steam, paved the way for indie developers to be like, hey, bring your games over here. Like, they can be small, that's okay. We're going to throw them in, this arcade that we have. And it really took off. I know there's a ton of games that I bought on 360 that were from that Xbox arcade just because they were cheaper than, a typical, big open world, big developer. So, yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of fun with Bastion. I actually talked to another friend who saw me playing it on Steam, and he's like, "Oh, you're playing Bastion? I beat that game like 10 years ago." He's like, "It's a great game." I'm like, "I've heard that a lot, and the Steam reviews do reflect that. They're overwhelmingly positive, and I couldn't tell you why I didn't ever play it. I think I just got too excited when I first bought a PC and bought way too many games at a time, and then that one just got lost in the shuffle."
So, do you know how you ended up getting this game? Did you get it in a bundle, or did you actually one day purchase this game specifically on Steam?
I purchased it specifically on Steam, probably during I get suckered into their fall sale, winter sale, summer sale, da 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 da.
Yeah.
So I'm sure in one of those sales it was fairly cheap since it was a game that came out in 2011, and I just picked it up because I thought I would play it, and I never did.
Nice. Is the combat similar to other Supergiant games, or is it different in that regard?
Yeah, so some of their Supergiant games are different styles. Like Pyre is more of like Pyre is probably my favorite of the Supergiant games, and maybe I'll talk about it at some point in this podcast. And it's more of like almost like a futuristic basketball type game. It's very, but has a way deeper story than that. So I think if I want to compare it to what the combat it would be more compared to a Hades, but just not as fluid as Hades combat, because Hades being a roguelite and more of a dungeon crawler, it's really tight mechanics to get through, the dungeons and whatnot. But I would compare it to that. It does have, a combination of using like abilities with just using a primary weapon, which you start with a hammer that you're swinging a bunch. But then you also have a secondary, more ranged weapon, which I was using. There's a bow and arrow, and I think I had like a little like pea shooter gun. And then in combination with that, there are tonics that you can use. Like I had a tonic that would heal myself, but I also had another tonic that if I died, it would give me one extra life to move on the level with. So certain things like that, you get buffs along the way. I think it was a great stepping point for them as a whole. I think they really built off of Bastion and create some really good games after it, and use pieces of Bastion into their later games, which I think is cool. So yeah, I'm glad I decided to play it because I'm a big fan of the developer, and I'll highlight them whenever I can.
Nice. Cool, man. Very interesting to hear it was on the Xbox 360 and the Xbox Arcade Marketplace heyday. Yeah, for my own library, for some reason, I have this game called Footlol. And no, I did not mispronounce that. It is actually Footlol, Footlol, with the LOL being capitalized. Footlol Epic Soccer League. I must have gotten this in a bundle because I'm pretty sure I did not purchase this at any point by itself. So yeah, this game's 10 years old. Looks like it was released back in 2013. And this would not be something I would normally play, but I actually had fun with this. So you have a soccer field. It's very cartoony, and you are not directly controlling any of the soccer players. These two teams, one team being yours and one team being the opponent, will just play. They will just play. And you, as like the godlike being overseeing the game, will throw obstacles in the way to try to hinder your opponent and help your team. And the longer you play, the more abilities and power-ups you unlock to help just mess with the game. And at first, they start out with giving you landmines. So you'll just, throughout while the game's playing, you'll drop landmines in front of the opposing players and it'll blow them away so your team can score goals. And then you eventually get a shield to protect you from the other team's landmines. There's goo you throw on the ground that slows people down. And then to counterbalance that, there's a speed ability. You can click on each individual player, give them a speed boost, and then they can get through the goo that would normally slow them down. You can build barriers. You can send in airstrikes. You can set the soccer ball on fire, which then causes the goalies to be afraid of it and jump out of the way of the ball instead of trying to block it. And yeah, and then in addition to that, you can upgrade your teammates' looks, but that's just all cosmetic. And then there's some other things you can do, like unlock additional ability slots, so you can come into games with more than just a handful of abilities. You can just keep coming in with more and more. Man, it's weird. It is weird. And then there's also an ability where you can drop additional soccer balls on the field. So next thing you know, there's 20 soccer balls on the field, airstrikes coming in, there's UFOs, there's cows, there's obstacles, slime goo, landmines. Next thing you know, though, the soccer field is just pure chaos. And you just hope that your team ends out ahead after all of these things getting in their way, just trying to play their normal game of soccer.
It definitely had to have been a bundle, because this is not something I'd ever expect you to play.
Yeah, no way. It was fun, though. It was fun for a short period of time. There's like 70 levels, and it would take hours and hours to finish this, but I would say after about the 40-minute mark, I was like, all right, the novelty is worn off. I'm good on all this. Apparently, at one point, there was a multiplayer as well, but this being a 10-year-old small indie game, I tried to join a server, as I always do, but nobody else was playing.
A for effort. It wasn't like Tomb Raider, where people were actually playing still.
Yeah, you never know. That's why I always try. You might just be pleasantly surprised that somebody else in this world is like, I'm going to play some foot-lol. Yeah, it was pretty fun. My only criticisms is there's no local co-op, which this would be a great game to play with a buddy on some couch co-op. There's no controller support, which kind of makes sense because basically the game is like, it's all UI based. Just point and click essentially, almost like an MMO or like a real-time strategy or something. It kind of, I guess it kind of in a way is a strategy game. The UI, the user interface, is beautiful. It was a very small team. I think only about 4 or 5 people worked on this, but whoever did the UI work, man, great job. It is so clean. I really enjoyed it. Being a software developer, I'm weird like that. Like, I notice the user interfaces, and I'll never call out a bad one because I know how hard it is to make user interface, but I will definitely praise a really good one. Yeah, it was a cool little game. Not going to go back to it, but it brought me at least 40 minutes of joy.
I say it could have easily been the opposite if it was just a throw in on a bundle. So at least you had somewhat a good time with it.
Yeah, unique premise too. I mean that could be incorporated into other sports and other ways of making games with similar gameplay. It was different, honestly, unique. Yeah. What were you gonna say?
I play a little Mario Strikers. I have the most recent one. I played the GameCube one. It reminds me of that, where obviously you control the players in Mario Strikers, but there are things that come down to, deter the other team or give power-ups to your team. So, a little similarity there.
Yeah. So that was it for the game on my Steam library that I normally would not play. So we were also looking into other extremely bizarre games, and Mitch, you found a weird one.
I did find a weird one.
I am very curious to hear how this one turned out for you.
Yeah, only 99 cents, and I had a little money in the Steam wallet, so it didn't put me back anything, which honestly, I wouldn't have paid $1 for this game if I had it. But the game is called My Name is Mayo. And we were just kind of going through games in Steam randomly, trying to keep them family friendly, because we know, as Mike said, in the deep depths of the Steam store, there are some very inappropriate games that we're going to refrain from sharing on this podcast. But this one, I can say, was not inappropriate in any way, but it was just very stupid. And essentially, you are literally you're not anybody. You're a finger, essentially, and what you're doing is clicking a mayo jar, which unlocks more Steam achievements the more you click it.
Huh.
And so I was clicking this thing. I probably clicked for 300, 500 clicks on it. And then I realized there was a little more depth to the game than I thought, which is good, because I thought it was literally just me clicking a mayo glass for, forever and ever until I unlocked every achievement. But you can go in and you can see all the achievements, and then it'll say, click here to unlock story. So I was like, okay, sure. I click on one of the achievements, and then I press play, and then as soon as I know the mayo jar is starting to get dressed up in certain things that pertain to the story that they're trying to tell. So, for example, one of the stories is just simply this girl is trying to grow up to be like her father, who is a rock star. And you start off with it, for instance, it says, when I was young, I wanted to be a rock star. And it just shows the mayo jar is now holding a guitar. And if you click a little more, you unlock more story. And then it just goes, my dad wanted me to grow up to be like him. And then it just shows the mayo jar with a mustache. And
what the heck?
Yep. So it's literally just the more you click, the more story you unlock. And your mayo jar is dressed up with different features and maybe holds different cosmetics. I don't know. It's incredibly strange, and I don't know anybody who would pay $1 for this, but apparently enough, because there is My Name is Mayo 2 and 3.
What? What the heck? See, when you first started describing this game, I was like, okay, is this like some game specifically made to give people Steam achievements? That's
what I thought originally, too. But there was actually a little story to it within the achievements that I think it really is an achievement grab, but I think they threw a little story in just to maybe add like a smidge of depth to the game. Instead of literally you just sitting there clicking a mayo glass for, forever long.
This is so weird. I mean, looking at it, some work had to go into this. I mean, there is art and different screens and stuff, and yeah, why is this a thing? And it has a very positive rating on Steam with over 2,200 reviews.
I did read some of the reviews, and there are a lot of troll reviews of people just literally just saying, just obviously it was probably before a time where reviews were very heavily moderated on Steam, and they still really aren't that much. So I think it's more just people just trolling and saying, this is a great game, you should buy it, 99 cents, click a mayo glass and get some Steam achievements. Wow. But then there were some that were obviously like, this is the dumbest game of all time, please do not waste your time, which that's really what it is. I mean, it is a big waste of time. I don't know who would just be one day wake up and log onto Steam and just be like, really want to play My Name is Mayo today. Yep, that sounds really good.
Wow. Did you look into the sequels at all? Are they the exact same thing?
No, I'll take a look now because I just noticed them at the corner of my eye, like when I was in the page about to launch it, because there was one of those, they always have those things where you can bundle together to get a cheaper price on all the games if you buy them together. And I want to say that there were two. I'm almost positive there were two more.
Okay. I'm not seeing any more by the same developer, but they have made some other weird games. They have a game called Mr. Massagey. Use your dating skills to get a well-earned massage through your gamepad controller. Oh God, why did I even read that out loud? All right. Forget I said that. Anybody listening, you don't want to know about that game.
I told you there's a dark hole of.
Oh, all right. Yeah, we've already begun going down the dark rabbit hole of Steam. No.
Okay, yes, there is a My Name is Mayo 2 and 3. One is My Name is Mayo 2 is 99 cents. My Name is Mayo 3 is $1.99.
Who is it by? Is it by the same developer?
Who is it's Green Lava Studios.
Yeah, that wasn't showing up for me when I clicked on it.
Yep, and I'm looking at the screenshots of My Name is Mayo 3. Looks like there might be a tad more depth to it.
Really?
Yeah, the Mayo's actually like walking around on a map, like.
Okay.
So maybe a little bit more depth.
Okay, My Name is Mayo 2 looks identical with some more colorful backgrounds. Yeah. And then My Name is Mayo 3. Oh, this is so stupid. What the? Yeah, the third one looks a little more advanced, I guess.
Yeah, along with story on My Name is Mayo, I will say they also just gave you stupid random facts, and honestly, I can't remember. I should have wrote a couple of them down because I don't remember what they were, but yeah, it literally, even in the about this game, it just says like their key features include unlock 50 unique achievements. So I really think they just wanted you to get achievements, collect the handmade Steam trading cards. They really just wanted you to get your Steam level up, and that seems to be the gist of it. There are online leaderboards though. For what, I am not sure. I'm guessing whoever clicked the Mayo jar the most.
And apparently the third one has also been released on PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. What the heck?
I don't get it.
And I just saw some weird stuff real quick just trying to look this game up. So, all right, anyway, moving along. We got one more weird game for you. We're hitting the hour mark, so we'll wrap it up here for you guys. So there was another game I checked out called Fine China. And this one's a VR game. And in this game, you put on a giant backpack. So you reach out with your VR hand, you grab the backpack, and as soon as you grab this backpack, it is stuck to your VR controller. So what you're supposed to do is then either put it in your back pocket or put it in your belt loop or something to simulate actually wearing the backpack on your back. And then you go through an antique shop with this giant backpack and try not to break everything. And everything you bump into just throws all the fine china and antiques on the floor, and then they smash, and then it racks up how much money and damage you've done. And your goal is to get through this china shop as fast as possible with doing the least amount of damage as possible. Now, of course, the real fun part of this... Oh, and there's other stuff, too. Like, you can go through a flower shop, an electronic shop, other stuff that has a lot of expensive things that you could possibly break. But let's all be honest, the fun part is just trying to do as much damage as you possibly can. So, pun intended, I ran through the china shop like a bull in the china shop and was just smashing everything. And it was mildly entertaining for a couple of seconds. But Wouldn't recommend the game, but it was a thing. And apparently not too many played it. Not too many people played it because right now it's sitting at 8 user reviews.
As dumb as my Mayo game was, I think I give you more credit this week for actually hooking up your VR, putting on the VR, and playing a game in it that you full and well knew was probably not going to be great.
Yeah, for sure. And my biggest gripe with this game, other than there not really being much to it, is in most VR games, you move yourself through a level. So you can either walk. Of course, you have limited space in a room when you're playing VR, so typically you can only walk so far, and then usually in games you teleport to the next spot, and then you continue on. This game is not that old. I guess it was made in 2017, so I guess it kind of had the excuse of being an early VR game, but instead of you moving through the level when you run out of space in your play area, you move the level around you. So instead of me being like I'm pointing 5 feet in front of me to teleport, instead I'm going to stand still, grab the whole level, and move it 5 feet closer to me. And it just was very unintuitive and very strange, and not the best way to handle navigating, especially when you have limited time. When they're like you're trying to get through a level as quick as possible, and you have to keep stopping and then moving the level. It was very weird. Anyway, some random VR game I got in a bundle. One of those weird ones that, just wouldn't have played if it weren't for us challenging ourselves to play these games. Well, that is it for me. Mitch, you got any final words on any of the games we covered this episode?
No, nothing. That was a good episode. It flowed together really nicely, and I'm looking forward to playing games I want to play for next week.
Yes, please. Well, we did play some good games we liked.
We did. We definitely did.
Anyway, thank you everybody for tuning in. Thanks even more if you made it all the way to the end of this episode. You can find our episodes on YouTube, Spotify, as well as Apple Podcasts. Mitch, where are we at other than that?
Yeah, you can find us on our Twitter, which is at Hills Are Silent, our Instagram, which is Instagram.com/Hills Are Silent. Our YouTube is at The Hills Are Silent. And our TikTok is at The Hills Are Silent Podcast. If you have any questions or comments or even game recommendations, as we said, you can send them to our email inbox, which is hillsaresilent@gmail.com. We'll catch you in the next episode.